Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradari Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradari Yashoda Nandana Vraja Jana Ranjana Yamuna Tiravana Chari Yashoda Nandana Vraja Jana Ranjana Yamuna Tiravana Chari Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradari Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradari Yashoda Nandana Vraja Jana Ranjana Yamuna Tiravana Chari Thank you. Yashoda Nandana Vraja Jana Ranjana Yamuna Tiravana Chari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradari Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradari Yashoda Nandana Vraja Jana Ranjana Yamuna Tiravana Chari Yashoda Nandana Vraja Jana Ranjana Yamuna Tiravana Chari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradari Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradari Yashoda Nandana Vraja Jana Ranjana Yamuna Tiravana Chari Yashoda Nandana Vraja Jana Ranjana Yamuna Tiravana Chari Srila Prabhupada ki Jai, Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam ki Jai, Nitai Gaura Premanande Haribol. Reading from Srila Prabhupada Lilamrita biography of His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. Shishikoda Nitai, Maya Purushashi ki Jai. Srila Prabhupada had come, so this is chapter entitled Preaching to America, Part 1. Srila Prabhupada had come to Philadelphia primarily for the Ratha Yatra. Since 1970s, the devotees had been holding Ratha Yatra in Philadelphia, although the early festivals had been small. For the first festival, the devotees had taken small deities on procession on a decorated cigar box. They had placed the deities on an altar on the bank of the Squillick River. Looks very familiar. And had held kirtan while people picnicked and lay around in the sunshine. The next year's festival had been a little bigger, with foot-high deities riding on a palanquin. It was still not a very ambitious festival, but Srila Prabhupada had written in appreciation, I am so glad to hear how nicely you performed Ratha Yatra festival. Next year, you can perform the regular ceremony with a card as we are doing in San Francisco and London. That will be very nice. It doesn't matter if you construct small one, but you can hold a festival. Ravindra Swarup had become temple president just after Prabhupada's letter had arrived, and he had resolved to have a real Ratha Yatra card for 1972. So the devotees had done it. A small cart, but a cart pulled in procession down to Washington Square. By 1973, they had made a large cart, and devotees from other cities had come to help with the festival. Again, Srila Prabhupada responded, at Ratha Yatra, there must be either one or three carts. It is very good news to hear that one television station is interested to do a special program on the Ratha Yatra festival. These festivals are good for showing to the people in general that Krishna consciousness is real enjoyment. Everything else is simply artificial. Your plans for Ratha Yatra festival are very nice. In the summer of 1974, Ravindra Swarup had written to Prabhupada about the preaching activities in Philadelphia and had sent photos of their Jagannath deities. Srila Prabhupada had been moved by the pictures. I want to thank you 100 times for the excellent way you are worshipping the deity there, as I can see from the color photographs you have sent. From my childhood, I was also worshipping Lord Jagannath. When I was 6 years old, my father gave me a Rath, and I was performing the Ratha Yatra in my neighborhood. Now, in the Western world, you are worshipping Lord Jagannath so gorgeously, and it pleases me very much. Thank you again for the way you are conducting the deity worship in the Philadelphia temple. As for the Ratha Yatra ceremony, you should go on with it, and I shall attend there next year. But you go on holding a splendid ceremony for the people of the city. I am sure that it will be a success. Srila Prabhupada ki Jai. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 5, Chapter 5, text number 29. So we have a prose again here, so I'll do that myself. Jadanta mukha badira pishachon madakavad avaduta vesho bibashyamanopi jananam grihitamona vratastushnim babuva. Word for word. Jada, idle. Anda, blind. Mukha, dumb. Badira, deaf. Pishacha, ghost. Unmadaka, a madman. What? Like. Avaduta Vesha, appearing like an Avaduta, having no concern with the material world. Abhibhashyamana, being thus addressed as deaf, dumb, and blind. Api, although Jananam, by the people, Grihita, took Mauna, of silence, Vrataha, the vow, Tushnim Babuva, he remained silent. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada Ki Jai. After accepting the feature of Avaduta, a great saintly person without material cares, Lord Rishabhadev passed through human society like a blind, deaf, and dumb man, an idle stone, a ghost, or a madman. Although people called him such names, he remained silent and did not speak to anyone. Please. After accepting the feature of Avaduta, a great saintly person without material cares, Lord Rishabhadev passed through human society like a blind, deaf, and dumb man, an idle stone, a ghost, or a madman. Although people call him such names, he remained silent and did not speak to anyone. Report. The word Avaduta refers to one who does not care for social conventions, particularly the Varnashram Dharma. However, such a person may be situated fully within himself and be satisfied with the Supreme Personality of Godhead, on whom he meditates. In other words, one who has surpassed the rules and regulations of Varnashram Dharma is called Avaduta. Such a person has already surpassed the clutches of Maya, and he lives completely separate and independent. Om Jnanatimirandasya Gyananjanashalakaya Chakshur Unmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Sthapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Svapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yutapadakamalam Shri Gurum Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunatam Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakam Vitamscha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopisha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priya Vanchakalpatarubhyascha Kripasindubhyeva cha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Vasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Mukam Karoti Vachalam Pangum Langaite Girimet Kipata Muhammad Shri Guru Dinatranam. The translation again. After accepting the feature of Avaduta, a great saintly person without material cares, Lord Rishabhadev passed through human society like a blind, deaf, and dumb man, an idle stone, a ghost, or a madman. Although people call him such names, he remained silent and did not speak to anyone. So here we are continuing to read the story of King Rishabhadev, and he is exemplifying extreme, you could say, in a modern days standards, extreme detachment. So after he was a king, he was ruling the entire world, and as we know, if you look in the history, how lavishly kings used to live, and there are like a few, I guess, kings and queens still left, and it is still quite lavish life. Uh, but that was in a Vedic society where the ultimate goal is self-realization. The wealth is not the ultimate goal of life. The ultimate goal of life is self-realization. So resources and wealth, etc. There is some necessity for that. There's no doubt, to some resources are necessary to look after the people. You need with the roof over your head and clothing and etc. And the king or the administrator, he needs the resources to create a certain environment for the people that is safe. There is police department, there may be some army necessary, even if the country may not be like a aggressor or something, but just to keep a certain peace in a society, that the criminals don't become too prominent, or that other countries kind of keep to some extent away, etc. So resources are necessary to keep things like that, create safety, uh, and create environment where people actually, according to the Vedic standards, can properly execute spiritual life, ultimate goal of life. So anything that we study and read in Srimad Bhagavatam in the spiritual culture, according to the modern standards, may look like challenging or unusual, or maybe even like a very provoking or difficult to understand, etc. But we have to understand that we actually grew up in this Western society, and we build up a certain values according to what is valuable in the modern day. So, like a general idea of modern day goal of life is economic development, to make your country more and more economically developed and financially strong, and provide more and more wealth for the citizens, for the uh, people, and the values, like how they're evolving. We can see the people used to be called citizens, now they are called consumers, how much they can consume various types of items in terms of clothing. And I'm coming from the Soviet Union background. There used to be like a new fashion coming at one point, like every couple of years, and certain things never went into fashion and never went out of fashion. Like car models was exactly the same year after year after year. They didn't have to worry to produce something more exciting, because people just would buy anyway. Or they had no money to buy, or they would get opportunity to buy, and they would buy anyway, whether the model looked great or whether it looked the same as 20 years ago. So there was like, actually every few years the model would change the name, but it looked like 95% as a previous model. So and now these things are just changing. We have this 4 seasons. The new fashion is coming. Like a half a year later, you can practically throw out the old thing because it's out of fashion. If you don't want to look like a dinosaur, you're wearing the thing from the last year. Are you that dinosaur or something? Just get a new one, throw the old one away. So these are kind of type of values, and become rich or famous, or you see advertised what is the greatest value, how your body looks like, or the shape of the body, and so many things. I mean, it's not to say that it has completely no value. I mean, you want to be healthy and in a good physical shape and etc. But you can see that in a modern society, it's like so much overemphasized, and this kind of body becomes like all in all, and people get a massive degree of depression if what is considered like a standard of the beauty in the society. If you are out of standard, like many people suffer from depression and etc. Teenagers suffer from a lot of kind of pressure to be of a certain standard, whatever the case may be, and etc. etc. So many values. Greed is like, or you like to achieve what you want by stepping on other people's kind of head, is considered, oh, this person is really making a head in life, is, or you like in a political field, if you're very expert in finding a fault with your opponent, this person is, you had this and that thing, you when you were in the school, like in university, you took some drugs, or just pointing out all the faults, not about how we're gonna, what is our policy to care for the society or for the people or etc. But how I can defeat my opponent, to call him ill names and etc. I mean, it's not in every case, but we can see a lot of that is happening in the modern day. You can get voted practically as a president or a prime minister just by how expertly you can, defeat the other opponents, bringing them down and etc. There is quite a few of cases in the modern day, even in the very powerful countries, when this is the case. So you can see there is kind of various values by which we kind of we are brought up, and it's good, when one becomes mature, is to look and analyze actually in that baggage that we brought with us in this world, that we picked up through childhood, from childhood, through educational system, through media, through films and movies and advertisement and marketing, the things of the modern day. So here we see a king, he give up his kingdom, all this wealth, power he had, he delegated to his sons, and he gave up his kingdom and kind of walks around almost as a dumb person that other people disrespect, and he decided not to speak to anyone and etc. So what is that? Why it is done? So it is people in this Vedic society at a certain stage of their life, after they went through the family uh, situation, when the children has grow up, when they perform their duty and children are kind of married, etc. A lot of people in the modern day go through the crisis at that point. It's called the middle age crisis. It's a kind of well documented psychological phenomenon when people lose their aspirations, or like realize whatever it was aspiring for, now it doesn't have any more drive. Like, a lot of people live for children, that, there is not even so much thinking required. A lot of people analyze what is the real meaning of life before they get into the job, get into the 9 to 5, etc., or whichever the schedule may be. They kind of have some thoughts about what is the meaning of life, what are you supposed to do. But when you get really into this 9 to 5 and the children and husband or wife, etc., you get like it's very clear, I just have to go to job and pay my mortgage, educate the children and etc. And that's like can be like for a few decades. But then children grew up, you give your life to kids, but the kids have got their own life now, they have their own jobs and their own kids. um, and the job that you were so motivated maybe in a career and etc., when you're like a 50, 60 years old, you maybe achieved what you wanted to achieve in your career as well. So at this point, a lot of people kind of suffer kind of loss of purpose, and it is, we understand that it is a certain design there, that it's not that this goals completely has no value, but we have to look, if you're planning your life, if you're making a project of your life, you have to look to all different stages of life. Now, I'm a student, I'm learning this and that, and in the Vedic system, what's the spiritual education, value education, character education, and building up deep spiritual experience of higher taste, that the life is goal and happiness. You don't put all your eggs into the basket that I'm just gonna be happy just by getting material wealth, or becoming like a famous, or becoming economically advanced, or even just to have a very nice family, because eventually, the children leave the home, and if you're living in UK, maybe they're gonna put you in a care home or something, eventually, um, and so you can't just think in a short term. Intelligent person thinks a long term. So in a short term, when you're a student, the education is very important, value, character development is important, and also very important to experience the higher taste. This is what is, even this temple situation is meant for, is either to live some time in a temple and experience higher taste, or learn from the people who live in a temple, who have dedicated their life for spiritual practices. They are experiencing this higher spiritual happiness and taste, and it is absolutely real, is not a phantasmagoria, and is much superior to anything else that is possible to experience materially through the sensual experience, coming through whatever, mind, intellectual pursuits, uh, emotional pursuits, and what to speak about sensual gratification in terms of eyes, tongues, belly, and even genitals. That these things on a material platform, they have limitations and they have a saturation point, and in comparison with the spiritual experience, they are very insignificant, in fact, with how much spiritual dimension can offer us. So that was the student life meant for, not only to gain education in your profession, but character development, and also spiritual development. So then when you enter the family life, it doesn't become just your ultimate goal, that this is going to be the all in all. You're actually doing your duty, educating the children, giving them as best possible education, and also spiritual education, but you're not putting all your eggs into the basket that is going to be ultimate goal in life. So when you hit 50 and 60, when the children has left your home, when you achieved your career goals, and etc., that you just now completely lost and thinking, what next? A lot of people go into this massive depression and lack of purpose. And as I mentioned, it's very well documented, the middle age crisis. You see some men, they buy like a Harley at that point, like Harley Davidson, and try to come back to the thing. They went through this 25 years of family experience, and then because that is no more a goal, then they kind of try to get back to their kind of youth, and teenage type of pursuits, get into the Harley, or find the secretary, like a young secretary or something, or a lot of people go through divorce at that time as well. Children grow up, and actually, I don't know what I have in common with my partner at this time, because children was some uniting factor, but now 25 years later, a lot of people just go through divorce, etc. At this point, and just people get into, or people find some crazy hobby, some anything, everything. So, or go to psychologist and try to work it out, what's going on with me, and etc. So that means it's unprepared. It means it was just a short term, thing. I paid my mortgage or whatever. Now, what is my next motivation factor? What's my next goal? So a lot of people get really lost at that time, and psychologists usually, recommend you just get into something different, right? Find a new drive and etc. in life, etc. and so on. But actually, the ultimate goal in life is the spiritual realization, finding the transcendental happiness beyond this matter. And this is the time, because you experience the transcendental bliss and happiness in your before you entered the marriage life, and of course you experience that as well throughout your uh, like a married life as well, unless you become a monk in a rare occasion, or a nun. But generally, people go through this, and then you have to balance. You may still carry on with your spiritual life, it's no doubt, that stays with you, but then you have to juggle, children education, wife, mortgage, or whatever the case may be, career, all those things you have to juggle around. So it's not like 100%, but then when all that is done and dusted, then it's again opportunity to give 100%, come back to your, pursuit of your, a lot of people very ideal, got these very ideal goals in their youth, then exploring everything, and that is natural. That's the soul's kind of drive of looking for purpose, looking for meaning. That is natural, and sometimes we have to balance, throughout this married life, grihastha called in Sanskrit, kind of juggle. But then when that is done, then it's very, very clear. There is no doubt at that point. It's not like a midlife crisis, but it's actually coming back to your original, like a giving 100% to your ultimate goal of life, for spiritual cultivation, self-realization, and actually preparing for final exam, elevating your consciousness and leaving this world in the best possible consciousness, that you don't come back again. And that's only possible not to come back when you have a pure love of God. That is the ultimate goal according to Vedic literature. And if you develop that love, then that's it. All your education, all your lessons, life after life after life, birth after birth after birth, has been learned. You have now achieved that goal, and you go back to spiritual realm. So in some extreme cases, is not in every case, but as you can see, Lord Rishabhadev accepted this avaduta stage, which is quite unusual, even for the standards of those days. That a person just totally decides, I just gonna keep away from everything. I just gonna keep silent and just completely just meditate on the Lord, and I don't care about anything. This is my complete and ultimate focus, that even I practically withdraw myself from the society and just, in this case, deaf, dumb, and blind. So in some extreme cases that was also done, but generally, like a husband and wife would retire from their activities of, full-time work and etc., and then absorb themselves 100% in a spiritual cultivation, like that. And sometimes, a husband would become like a full-time monk, and the last stage of life, after some time of kind of doing that together with wife, would become again, like a monastic for the last part of life. So like Srila Prabhupada did that before coming to the West. So that was the Vedic system, which is entirely, fully, 100% focused on achieving this ultimate goal of life. And everything is favorable for it, was accepted it, even according to some external standards may look unusual or even unacceptable, but it may be those values, that what is unacceptable is based on values, temporary values of this material world, that are not aiming on an ultimate spiritual emancipation of the soul. So that was a general idea. And also, in terms of this avaduta stage, so we, of course, we don't practice this in the modern day because there is some principles of that we read and study in literature, spiritual literature, but its application in the modern day can be quite different. We often take the principle rather than the detail. So the principle as well, what we can learn here, and we learn the same principle in Bhagavad Gita, is that what is night for an ordinary materialistic person is a day for an introspective sage, and what is a day for a sage, it is a night for a materialistic person. So what does it mean? That actually there is a difference in values. There is a difference, or very strong difference of what the spiritual person values and what a materialistic person values. So, when this materialistic person may look at a spiritual person, may think, this person is in complete darkness. Is wasting his time, why is doing this meditation, why is rising early, why is rising at 4 o'clock, this, sleep. I mean, some, of course, people who are very focused materially, they also rise early. But in terms of the values is the main difference. It may not be so much externally, but internal values and aspirations and what drives the person may be completely, not maybe, is completely different. And also, like a devotees, you can see they also work very hard, and materialistic person will work very hard. But the driving inspiration coming from inside, the motivation coming from inside is quite different. A devotee works for this, for purifying one's consciousness, for the change of heart, for becoming free from greed, becoming free from envy, becoming free from anger, and cultivating pure, pure love, developing pure love of God. Thank you. Thank you very much. Cheers. So while materialistic, mundane person, you may think, what is the point of this kind of motivation? Is driven by, a greed, or driven by some gratification or some obsession that may have in the form of whatever the case may be. People become obsessed actually often by anything that gives them some gratification. As we read, he pretended to be mad that he doesn't get disturbed. But often there's a tendency for us to become mad after something that gives us gratification for senses, and become very attached and very obsessed. And when we don't get the object of our gratification, for whatever reason, we become very upset and very, very angry and disappointed. So that is there. But a spiritual person, he values the purification of the heart. It values the character that manifests by cultivating spiritual life. It values, even more than the mundane education, values spiritual education, because then whatever education we gain in terms of profession, it can be used properly. It can, and anything, any talent we have, materially coming through whatever our psychophysical nature, that can be also used for spiritual emancipation, because it's not that we give up this or neglect this, but we use that for our spiritual growth. We can use the talents for sharing with other spiritual knowledge. We can use those talents to help others spiritually, and also, a certain degree of economic development is necessary, but not to the degree that it takes all your time away, but is up to the point that you have a roof over your head, feeding, like a lot of economists now understanding that the best economic system is a local economy. You don't need to bring anything from other part of the world. You grow things locally, and that saves a lot of energy and a lot of time and a lot of massive of times of arrangements, to bring something from the Europe, or bring bananas from South America. It's such a massive arrangement to do, flying and organizing and keeping it cold, and then ripening it here, all sorts of massive arrangements is necessary. So many people involved, to get that done. If you grow things locally, etc., then all this over endeavor, it's a massive over endeavor, because we as modern society are so over gratifying ourselves. So the whole thing becomes such a big over endeavor. Our needs are so much out of control because we are unsatisfied. If you are satisfied, we need little. We don't need so much. The reason we're so much over endeavoring, because we become over attached to so much comforts, to so much gratification, to have all sorts of things all year round, and all sorts of fashions every couple of months, and etc. It's such a massive takes so much energy. And then with all that efficiency that we introduced, it just makes people to work even harder, actually. In terms of the production rate, it has to increase more and more and more with all those modern technologies and etc. I mean, we're not against necessarily them, we're using them as well, but with a different motivation and different purpose to uplift consciousness. So economic development, it can be there, but not that it takes all your 100% time away, but actually that you have time for spiritual cultivation, and also for sharing, educating, teaching people, giving people spiritual experiences, sharing with people spiritual experience and spiritual knowledge, and establishing these higher values, and giving people opportunity to plan their whole life, not just what they're gonna eat today, or how much they're gonna create an empire that they're gonna have to leave behind in the end, but just thinking about this whole life up to the last breath. This is the Vedic idea. Krishna consciousness is how you can prepare for departing this world in the best possible elevated consciousness, and everything that is done is done for that preparation. So are there any questions or comments on this point? Or challenges? Maybe you completely disagree. I'm thinking this is too extreme. Yes.
It's that last comment you made.
Can you switch off the mic to the the camera? The mic to the camera of the mic. You know how to do it, so that we can hear Javatas, and we'll show you next time. Okay, it's okay. We'll pass this one. No problem.
At the end of the class, the purpose of spiritual education is to plan our lives so that at the very end of life we can culminate, all of our education culminates in being able to have the correct consciousness to attain the spiritual destination. It's also mentioned in the Srimad Bhagavatam that the duty of a spiritual master is to teach his disciple in such a way that this disciple will remember the Supreme Personality of Godhead at the end of life. So, there's a lot of our education is focusing on young people, but it would seem that, although we say to people, that you shouldn't wait until the end of your life until you start this process, but it is still the case that at the end of life there does seem to be more when people are very sick, very weak, or perhaps very distressed because they know that they're going to leave the world and leave their loved ones. It does seem at that time that there is some chance of reaching people. And because in society and now is so geared towards, there's so much death, and death is like highlighted in society every day. The number of deaths are being counted, but society has forgotten how to cater to people who are like about to die. There's no priests, there are very few priests or very few ministers going into that situation. So I just wonder, if the goal of life is to attain, sobriety at the end of life, then what can we do as a spiritual movement to reach to people at that point?
Okay. And it is ideally if we can educate people while they're still young, because this is when you build your habits and values, and it's more difficult, generally speaking, when you are built up your values and you lived your life in a certain way, like for 50, 60 years. At that point, to embrace, very strongly spiritual culture, it's not so easy, and adopt, yourself. It is definitely more difficult, but obviously it's not impossible. In one of the purports, Prabhupada says that one should practice this from the beginning of life, or from the point of understanding its importance. So, technically speaking, none of us, or majority of the people in this movement, they haven't started it, at least from childhood. I mean, it's a growing number. We have now more people born in the movement. We're starting in from their childhood, but even a lot of them, they explore as well as values of this modern world until they understand the true value of what they've been given. But from the point of understanding the value of it, whatever the case may be, whether you're young or later on in life, that what opportunity we can offer to people. And I mean, the movement is still in the early stages, and what we can do, in due course of time, how we can offer that facility and opportunity. I mean, we can see there is a number of senior people who we introduced, to Krishna consciousness, and they're very successfully practicing it, in different capacities. So that's definitely there. But in terms of what we can do more, uh, then I mean, there's a few various things that are not necessarily impossible ideas. Like we can see a lot of people nowadays put their parents into care home, for example, and a number of them spend the last days of their life, a little bit lonely. Uh, but it's not impossible that devotees could create, that kind of situations for the people. Um, at first, maybe for devotees themselves, who would like to retire, as we read, in Rishabhadev. That's kind of situations can be far too austere, but having a place where you can live near the temple and do a little bit of service, and you're taken care of as well by some junior members of the society who offer some care. That's wonderful. That's a service, and it's also it helps to depart this world in a Krishna conscious way. Opportunity for association, opportunity for service, opportunity for performing spiritual life. And as the movement grows, that could be done, for society in general as well. Or like businesses, you have funeral directors and that kind of thing. It's not impossible that could be a devotional project like that. Back to Godhead funeral directors. And then the people need just like a devotee's own crematorium or something, where it's people are perform this last rites, and with a tulsi or something, that make sure that people's departure is the best possible. Uh, speaking, it may sound a little bit kind of far stretched, but technically speaking, it's not impossible in a generation or two that these things will be there, and not only devotees will take advantage of this, but people in general. The Hindu Forum of Britain already are thinking of creating like a Hindu crematorium. So it's not impossible that this could be like run by devotees, and then they would like a completely person would had no may decide to spend their last days with the devotees or something, or if they died in a completely material condition, they could still have their last rites performed for them, which is quite uh, spiritual, and it kind of ensures them better destination than it could have been just in a normal situation. I don't know, do you have any other suggestions here?
No, thank you for discussing this. Yeah, I mean, just to discuss it opens up different possibilities, because, although devotees may benefit from like a devotional cremation, but we really want to try to help people before they move on to their next destination. So,
Right.
So the hospice movement is obviously one, because we have in Vrindavan and in Mumbai and now in other places. ISKCON has care facilities for devotees who are leaving their bodies, and also for friends and families of devotees who want to take advantage of the same facility. Also in Mayapur, there's one ashram, Bhagavatam, which is designed specifically for that purpose. So certainly, it's definitely something I'm interested in myself. And I think especially in the present environment where families are not able to have personal, care of their family members and are not allowed into hospitals, it's an opportunity it's not an opportunity for us to do anything now, but to actually think about how we can reach those family members who are feeling separation, and perhaps like give them options of how they can perform some meditation or some prayers for their family members.
Mhm.
You know, there are devotees like Mahaprabhu, who's now qualified as like a multi-faith chaplain. So in chaplain hospitals have got chaplains, but generally they don't have devotees. So
Mhm.
you know, they have chaplains in airports and in big factories, big companies have got chaplains,
Mhm.
like care for the spiritual and like emotional needs of the workforce. So there are lots of opportunities before people actually leave their body.
Mhm.
Yeah. And there are another
Sorry.
devotees, like the prison ministry is another one. So,
Yeah.
so there are lots of opportunities. Yeah, just.
True. Yeah. Thank you.
But I didn't mention it because I didn't mention it because I had any suggestions. But now that you've spoken about it, it's shown some possibilities.
And there is a lot of support actually in the care homes, etc. They do, get a lot of support from government and that kind of thing. So it's also, something that we can provide devotees employment, and it's a devotee care, and etc. I mean, all sorts of things are there. Is definitely a very good project in various ways. Uh, yeah. Okay, let's stop here. Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, Nitai Gaura Premanande. Gaura Bhakta Vrinda ki jai. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare.